and hopefully your summer week has gone good so far. We are getting into chapter 4 in the infancy, getting you ready for leading your presentation on a major mental health disorder. So that could be anorexia, alcoholism, addiction, depression, bipolar, anxiety. Even some students in the past have done child poverty and how food deserts have affected the mental health of others. Maybe even COVID and the research studies coming out. So lots of options there. Again, getting into developmental theories and all that. We are now at the baby has been born, and lots of junk in the keyboard. Since the baby has been born, we're in infancy. So luckily I do have 2 infants of my own right now, and I'm learning quite a bit still. It feels like you always learn stuff. So there's social change and consequences for infants. Some of this in chapter 4 says the high infant mortality historically. So a lot of folks died, and again, going back to that population model, when my dad was born in 45, there was 2 billion. Sister was born in 71. There was about 3 billion for the global population. When I was born in 78, there was about 4 billion. When my little sister was born in 86, there was 5 billion. We hit 6 billion in 1999. And then 7 billion in the 2000s. So only recently we've gotten above 7 billion onwards to 8 billion, and there was a high infant mortality because of that. The main developmental task in infancy was survival. So it was with different medications and different antibiotics and stuff like that that we started seeing the rates decreased dramatically with improved nutrition and control of infections and diseases. So the different medication that came up and things of that. Also increased recognition in early 1960s. So we'll get into that, how population has grown. This was the best video I had found on it too. So we were 170 million people, again, not too long ago. So see if I can get this to play for us.
An environment is a system of living things. The earth is our environment. The capacity of our environment to provide space, to produce food, and to supply energy are all limited. Humans thrive on less than 17% of the Earth's surface, and only about 4% can grow crops. We depend on these limited resources for our survival. Yet we are increasing our population as if they were infinite. This fact is at the core of our environmental problems. On this map, we'll show population growth from the year 1 CE to the present. project our growth into the year 2050. Population concentrations will be indicated by dots, each of which will represent 1 million people. In areas where people are spread out and don't live in concentrations of 1 million, dots are placed in the middle of their approximate range. Historical references will be provided by images and text at the bottom of the screen.
So this is just after Jesus was born and then crucified. The historical account, then the Roman Empire got big until the 400s, really. A lot of people in India during this time, from 3 to 400. Then you had some of the Mayan Empire, which was more in Egypt. Or I'm sorry, in South America, Central America, really. So that is more over here, Mayan Empire. The spread of Islam wasn't until 600 or 700, so one of the last major religions to be formed. A lot of it in India. And even the Middle Ages. So as you can see, China and India already have a lot by 1,000 years in. Then the trans-Saharan trade. I don't think anybody took a boat across the ocean until like 1400. Now during the European Crusades, there was a lot in 1100 and 1200. Mongolians, and then a few more starting across the ocean. In 1300, this was like the plague, so it actually killed off a lot of Europeans. Then the Aztec empires, so some of the stuff over here. European exploration, so I guess they do have one here now in America. The Atlantic slave trade was 1600s and 1700s. Colonial America wasn't until like the late 1700s, really. And then the Industrial Revolution is where we start booming. This is where you'll see most of the years I was talking about. So we're at 1 billion in 1900, 2 billion by 1930, 3 billion in 71, 4 billion in 86, 6 billion, there it is. And that goes on to 2050.
Our population is expected to grow to 10 billion by the end of the century. Yet the Earth's size remains the same. Slowing human population growth and lowering our use of natural resources are key to reducing the impact we have on the planet. Through the decisions we make about our lifestyles, our numbers, and our consumption, we can all help preserve the health and beauty of our home.
So 4, and then 5 billion. That was in like 86. So yeah, 2 billion and 43 up until 71. This is where it really blew up. 3 billion with the baby boom in 65 to 79, 4 billion in 83, 5 billion in by the 90s, and 6 billion was in 1999 because I actually was in class for that. So as you see here, there's a large population boom and bust. So here's what the United Nations has to say about it too, with population and number of babies that are being born.
For millions of parents around the world, childbirth is a moment of celebration unlike any other. Yet, without timely access to maternal and newborn care, childbirth can quickly become a life or death lottery. Every 11 seconds, a mother or baby dies due to complications during pregnancy or childbirth. The most common complication for mothers is severe bleeding, which can occur without warning and can kill even a healthy woman in just 2 hours. UNFPA is the lead UN agency for ending all preventable maternal deaths. We have made it our mission to ensure that every woman and baby has timely access to quality maternal and newborn care, no matter where they live. In 2008, we created the Maternal and Newborn Health Thematic Fund to end preventable maternal and newborn deaths and morbidities in 32 low-income countries with some of the highest numbers of maternal and newborn deaths. Guinea and Senegal are 2 countries supported by the fund, and in some regions, highlighted in red on these maps, it can take over 4 hours to reach care, and for many, that is simply too late. For the ones lucky enough to reach a clinic in time, the care they receive is often poor. The Thematic Fund aims to provide every woman timely access to life-saving interventions, such as emergency cesarean section surgeries for mothers and intensive care for newborns, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Since its creation, the fund has contributed to ensure access to safer delivery for 28 million women, including an estimated 4.2 million women facing life-threatening complications. Together, we can ensure that no mother dies while giving life.
So that's some of the stuff that has come up with childbirth. And it's a big deal. So getting into our next set of slides on chapter 4, some of the things we've done in America, we had increased recognition in the early 60s of consequences if you had poor early child development. So we did the Head Start program in 1965, and even then did the early Head Start program in 95. So that was definitely necessary. Some of the social change here in chapter 4 and those consequences for infants, we had the both parents are working now, greater number of unmarried women, increased number of teenage mothers, and increased substance abuse by mothers. So that could have been how even the FBI forced a crack epidemic inside of the lower 48 and even the opioid epidemic. There's some research on that if you look it up, but just kind of how the drugs took off in America. We have different policies towards child care. So some that are coming up and are to be considered. The Lanham Act was provided for government support for childcare during World War II. The daycare programs increased in the 1970s. The Child Care Development Fund was then put into place, and then dependent care child credits. And then finally, welfare reform was in the 90s. So some of the things that came up. Now, here's our infancy stage of human development. It's from birth until about 2 years. The hallmarks of infancy: physical growth, motor development, vocal development, and then cognitive and social development. So those are some of the things that have come up. Also, rapid and physical growth during the first year. Growth and size depend on environment conditions as well as genetic endowment. So the genes do get taken into account. But again, if you're in a food desert or you lack access to nutrition, right now we have a formula shortage, things of that nature, it's going to be hard to grow. And those are vital years of growth. So the first 2 years. And we do get into trauma and how that could affect children's cortisol level and their growth. Some of the physical growth, like if your birth weight is 6 when you're born, it doubles in 5 months. You'll probably be 12 at 24 weeks. Birth length is doubled by 3 to 4 years of age. So you go from probably 1.5 feet to around, so like 18 inches up to 3 feet. Especially with males, their average height is 5'9" or 5'10". With females, maybe a little less. But at 2 years old, you're half your adult height. So whatever your adult height is, that is doubled, and you'll see some of those. We have a 2-year-old in about a week, so I wanted to get record of that. That's kind of interesting. Some red flags are like large or small head size. That could mean potential cognitive deficits, and even small height. So that's potential genetic syndromes. The infant brain. So brain growth is most critical to biophysical human development. At 1 year, they're about half the size of an adult brain. There's already billions of neurons. So again, that development is huge. Proper nutrition during this period of rapid brain growth is critical. So especially important fats. So growth does not happen at the same rate all over. Body's growth from head to the feet is called pseudofocal, and then the proximodosal is from the spine to the extremities. So maturational theory is genetically programmed sequence. Like these are things, again, so much is going on these first 2 to 3 years. It's so key and valuable to have everything needed for kids, especially nutrition and brain development. So some of the milestones, they help us understand the normal or typical sequence of development. Those in the 50th for age does not take into account the quality, like clinical experience needed. So station, posture is in sitting and standing positions. Gait is how we as social workers check out their movement. It also helps us identify those who may be at risk for a developmental delay, not necessarily a developmental disorder. So those that cannot perform a task that 90% of babies can, that's kind of how we screen out for those that are struggling. Screen recommendation at 9, 18, and 24 months, or 30 months is the AAP. So they're trying to see if there are things that you're missing. Here's a lot of the gross motor. Involves large muscle activities. So At 22, kicks a ball with demonstration. That's interesting too. But starting at 1 month, you begin turning your head. Then at about 4 months, rolls from front to back. Then 7 months, sits without support. 10 months, creeping well, cruising around the furniture. 12 months is at like independent steps. And then 14 months, stands without pulling up and walks well. 16 months, they can even walk backwards. And then 22 months, that's where they kick. At 2 years, they can kick a ball, jump with 2 feet off the floor, and throw a big ball overhead. So you see a lot of stuff that comes up there. See if I can get a search on videos for motor and sensory development on the lifespan development. So here we go. Here's some of them. So here's some of the newborn reflexes we talked about last class too.
All full-term newborn babies are born with some natural reflexes, including sucking, walking, holding, and the startle or morrow reflex. If all these reflexes are present, the parents can be reassured that their baby's development is normal. This will not be the same in premature babies, as they still have some way to go. Following the birth of the baby, the midwife or paediatrician will check for these reflexes. Victoria's newborn Esme is being checked out by her midwife Andrea, and she shows how her legs already know how to move in a walking motion. Consultant neonatologist Ryan Watkins is checking over 3-day-old baby Tamami.
So you can see her legs are flexed and moving normally, and her arms are slightly flexed as well. It's a bit unfair to expect this one to flex too much given the weight of the canyon. And you can see she's a newborn baby and the central tone is low, so she arches over my hand. The baby was a month or 2 old, you'd expect that to be straight and trying to lift her head. What I can do then is just check her morrow reflex. And to do this, I just drop her backwards into the palm of my hands. It appears a little bit startling, and startle reflex is another word for it. You can see her fling her arms out to the side and open her eyes, and then they return to the normal position. If I open her hand up, place my pad of my thumb in the palm of her hand, which is fine. The same thing will happen on her feet. You can check its symmetrical rolling this side too. It's very alert just now.
These reflexes will disappear over time as the baby develops and becomes stronger.
So those are some of these reflexes that we talked about last class. Some of the red flags are that if at 9 months they have the inability to sit, which should have happened at about 7 months, and then at 18 months, the inability to walk independently. Those are some of the flags that come up. Here is a chronological progression of the gross motor development. So in the first 12 months, again, like turning head, rolls from front to back, sit without support, creeping on the wall or the furniture. At 12 months, independent steps, and then at 14, stand without pulling up. And those are some of the big ones. We'll go over a few more next week, but here's now the fine motor skills. So this involves smaller muscle activity. So at 2 months, they hold a rattle placed in their hand. At 3 months, they might start batting objects. At 5 months, reaching and grasping objects. At 6, transfers from hand to hand. And at 9, they bang 2 cubes together. At 11 months, they could even throw an object, and then 12, they've got that pincer grasp, so they pick up like blueberries and small things. 14 imitates back and forth scribble, even building a 3-cube tower. Then at 20 months, closes the box with a lid, imitate vertical lines. And then at 2 years, a child can create a 6-block tower, feed themselves with a fork or spoon, remove clothing, and grasp and turn a doorknob, which is funny. We actually had that come up yesterday, and that's interesting that that's some of the important ones that come up. So I'm gonna pop those in here too, as there's some good videos the last time I taught the class that shows those developmental milestones in a video. So it actually looks like the same one that we had just watched, but I want to make sure that it's not. I have a feeling that it is. Motor development, and then those gross motor skills. So can stack blocks, points to the body parts, and the different things that come up with the citations here, which is nice. But here's another one. Different games that you can play with the baby at 1 month.
They're not going to talk, but they are listening. You say, "Oh, are you hungry?" And then you pause. They're not going to answer you, but learning that communication is a two-way street is something that you can definitely embed in a daily activity.
Wow, what are you looking at out there? What are you looking at? Yeah, you do. Yeah.
To keep them engaged, you could use a toy or a rattle or something that they like. In the first month, they start to gravitate towards different toys that they like. You can use that to help. One thing that will tend to help them stay engaged is a face.
So they said even avoid the screen time there, which is definitely true. And then you go to tummy time.